By Complete Quarterback. I'm your host, John Sirianidis, and we are back after a brief 2-week hiatus due to the NFL draft. And tonight, I'm joined by Randolph High School head football coach Jonathan Marshall. Coach Marshall, good to see you, my friend.
Awesome. Good to be seen. Thank you for having me, John. This is great. I appreciate you having us on.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the time, and it is a Randolph football night tonight because we have Alan Nariska afterwards and Abe Cornett. So on the recruiting,
we got some great people lined up. I'm sure you'll hear. We'll have to keep a count of how many times people say winners do more.
Yes,
well, there you go. Track of that. Yeah.
If you're going to use mantras, you want them in slogans, you want them to remember them. That's a good thing.
That's it.
Before we get started here, I do want to remind you that we are brought to you by Complete Quarterback. Visit CompleteQB.com today for all your quarterback coaching needs. Quarterbacks coach Chris Johnson has been in the business for over 25 years. He is one of the best quarterback coaches in the country. As a fellow Norwood guy and a guy who has coached his camps for years, I can attest for years that I coach quarterbacks, I use many of his same techniques and drills. If you visit CompleteQuarterback.com today or CompleteQB.com today, there's tons of drills and information on there to make you a better coach. And if you're a quarterback, you can go on to CompleteQB.com and learn how to become a better quarterback. Visit CompleteQB.com today for more information. All right, Coach Marshall, again, I want to say thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it. Of course, you guys coming off another terrific season for the program. You have done such a great job turning this program around. And I remember, and I've known a lot of people in Randolph through the years, just simply from being in the football world in the area and coaching semi-pro football. I used to know people over there with the Randolph Oilers and when I coached with the Quincy Granite. And then I knew Coach Branch for a while there. He was a head coach there. Coach Crawford was there with him. But Randolph has always been a program that people have talked about. It has potential. It could be a really good program if the right guy gets in there. And more so, I felt that was being said after Coach Branch because I think he did a good job there trying to make the program competitive. You've been that guy. You've been the right guy for the program. So right out of the gate, what has been the key to your success? How have you been able to take a school the size of Randolph High School and turn it into a program where now year in and year out, you guys expect to compete for league titles and for state titles?
Yeah, I appreciate that compliment a lot. And I think the answer is I've got great kids. I have amazing student athletes, amazing football players, and they were always here. You look back at, like you were talking about the history of the program. I'm blessed that I've married into some Randolph alumni. My in-laws are all from Randolph. And there's a long history here of great, football and great athletes. You just walk into the gym and you can see the banners from the previous years. So it starts with my players. I'm very blessed to have some amazing players, and some of them are going to be on later tonight. So, I appreciate the compliment, but it is the kids. And I think it's my job to create a structure for those kids to excel in and continue to give them opportunities day in and day out at different points of the year for them to succeed. And I think, in my role, it's to show how choices that are made connect to future success, whether they, make a mistake or they're making a great choice, whatever it is just giving them that structure. And it boils down to consistency in that. Like you mentioned some of the previous coaches, and I talked to Coach Branch. We see him almost every night after a game. He's still hanging around. We talk. I think consistency was the biggest thing. This is, and it's not a knock on any of my predecessors. There were great coaches come through, but from what I looked at, I'm the first coach at Randolph to graduate a class since the 1990s. So, it's a tough place, right? It can be a tough place at times. It's, we're certainly not rolling around in money and resource and things like that, but we've got amazing kids. We've got amazing community support when it comes to athletics. So having that consistency and opportunities for kids was really kind of what I think took us in the right direction.
Talk a little about your background, your coaching career, how you got into coaching, and ultimately how you ended up at Randolph High School.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I grew up down in Taunton, Massachusetts, and 3 days after graduation, I went to Marine Corps boot camp. I spent 6 years in the Marines. And then as soon as I got out, I got a job working for the YMCA, and I emailed every coach in just about the eastern part of the state, and gave some background, gave my playing background. I obviously played in high school, and I was also a pretty good track kid in high school. And I said, I'll do whatever. I'll volunteer. You don't have to pay me. I just want to learn how to coach, because I had great mentors when I was a young man, and I kind of wanted to give back. And I just loved working with kids and helping that development. And I emailed, this is no joke, John, I probably emailed over 50 coaches, and one guy emailed me back. And that was Gary Doherty at Framingham High School, who obviously
I've known Gary forever. And
yeah.
And I must say, it's not a surprise to me that Gary's the guy that emailed you back, because Gary's always been a guy that has been about giving back to the game. He's always been a guy who is about giving people opportunities. His involvement with the Massachusetts High School Football Coaches Association, he's always been about giving back to the game.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest lessons I learned from Gary. I spent about a decade coaching with him. And I originally just started coaching freshman football and coaching track, and just consistently showed up. Like I said, I was originally started out as a volunteer, and I was totally fine with that. I had to earn my way. And I really grew under his leadership. And we had some good years in Framingham. We had some years we struggled. We had some good players, and then we had some years that we really had to develop as coaches. And I actually think those years that we kind of struggled made me a better coach, because we had guys go and play at Bentley. We had one kid who had a offer to go play for the Colts on the practice squad. We had these amazing kids, but it was the years that we didn't have those athletes, I think, made me a better coach, because I had to really refine my game. And whether I was the special teams coordinator or the offensive line coach, whatever role Gary put me in, I just embraced it and ran with it. And he gave me plenty of opportunities. And I'll never forget, after about 6 years coaching with him, we were talking in the parking lot one day, and he goes, you're going to be a head coach someday, and this is the things you got to do. And the thing he said to me at that point was, you have to show the kids you care about them. And if you show them you care about them, they'll run through a wall for you. And that has stuck with me to this day. And I think that's the most important part. And so, when I hit the fast forward button, I did some coaching in Holliston for Todd Kiley. And I think the way I look at that is, Gary taught me how to coach, and Todd Kiley taught me how to run a real good program. Because Holliston for a while there was kind of one of the benchmarks of football in Eastern Massachusetts. And I learned
a tremendous coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I learned a lot from both of those guys. And so it's been great. Getting crashed by my 7-year-old son. It's awesome. So it's Todd really taught me how to run the program. And with that combined, that's what I felt prepared to come to Randolph and really lead it, is care about the kids and create that structure like we were talking about before. And I think that's what's kind of made us really successful.
So aside from those things, how else have you been able to take what you've learned at Framingham and Holliston and apply it into your principles, your core beliefs for running a football program? What are your core beliefs? When a kid decides that they're going to play football at Randolph High School, from a belief standpoint, a philosophical standpoint, what do you expect from them?
Yeah, I want you to ask Abe and Alan that when they come on, because we have 4 program core values at Randolph. And I think you have to have some kind of core value, something that drives it. And for every program, it can be a little bit different. And our first program core value is winners do more. And, that is really our mantra. And I know sometimes it can get a little hokey, but, we emphasize to kids, it's we want you to do multiple sports. We're big believers in the multi-sport athlete. So I expect my kids to be doing spring track, volleyball, whatever it is right now, just be doing some sport. But also you should be in the weight room too at 6 o'clock in the morning with us, getting after it. So that's that part of that mantra. And then our other core values are actually from some other coaches I've learned, including my predecessor at Randolph, which is everything we do is for improvement. Mental strength is our greatest strength. And we practice successful habits 100% of the time. And I bet my guys, when they come on at 8:35, could rattle those off, because we start every meeting as a team with those 4 core values. I just walk in and I say, program core values are, and the guys just can say them right off the top of their head. And the reason we do that is because there's nothing there about how to block inside zone or the 3-4 defense. It's about character. And that's at the basis of everything we do, is developing these young men with their character, because, statistically only 3% of them are going to go play college football, but 100% of them are going to go be adults in this world. And so we got to really focus on their character. So those 4 core values, that's what drives the whole bus for us.
Yeah, and it's important. And look, I've been in education for 30 years as a teacher, coach, and administrator. We're in the business of developing people. I say it all the time. Our job is to develop people. And in a perfect world, and you know this, Coach, you want to develop model citizens. You want to develop good husbands, good mothers, good people. Everybody has a different story, though, and everybody has a different path in life. But the bottom line is, if you can equip these young people with the skills that they need to function and succeed when they graduate high school, then you've done your job. And I think football, all sports do this, but I think football more so than any other teaches you so many lessons. And it's so important to take those lessons and apply them to life when you do get to that part of your life. Obviously, like I said to start the show, you've had some success here the last few years, making Randolph High School into a program that can be a perennial state title contender. A lot of that also starts with culture. You mentioned your core values. Core values and all that stuff are great, right? Speeches are great. Sayings are great. Putting stuff on the wall, all that stuff is great. But at the end of the day, you need buy-in. The kids have to buy in and believe. What would you say has been a key to your buy-in? And I ask you this question because when I look at the job you've done there, my friend, you've done a tremendous job getting this program going. For any coach out there watching that might be going into their first year as a head coach or as a coordinator aspiring to become a head coach, how do you get buy-in? Because that's the key to being successful. If the kids don't buy in, you're not going to last very long, no matter how good a coach you are, no matter what your schemes are. You're not going to make it unless the kids buy in.
Yeah, I think a little bit goes to the first thing we're talking about, which is showing the kids you care, right? And that doesn't have to be this huge act. It can just be like, oh, hey, I heard your mom wasn't feeling too well. How's she doing? Right. So those little things of like, okay, this coach does not care just about the X's and O's. He cares about me as a person and those individual relationships. And as the head coach, that can be tough when you're working with anywhere from 40 kids that we have at Randolph to when I was at Framingham with 110 kids, right? Like that can be hard. But the buy-in is showing you care, but then also showing how decisions are made directly impact success. So like one thing that we do as a program is we track everything that a player does throughout the year, and we give them an incentive to that. So every year, your grades, if you have a top GPA for us, guess what you get to do? You get to pick the number first you're going to wear for the season. So like giving little incentives like that. So you might have worn number 2 last year, but if your grades or your participation in other sports, which is something we talk about, isn't there, and we track who does what, then guess what? You're not going to get to pick your number first. A sophomore might pick it over you and you're a senior. So like giving those little incentives along the way. And as you show the kids, like, well, the more you do the right thing, success will be there. And I think that comes down to data. So like when we do our testing in the off season, as like the summer conditioning program wraps up and we show like, for example, if X amount of kids I can give you the numbers. We know that if we have 11 or more kids test into our 1,000-pound club, we're going to be a playoff team. Like every year we've had 11 or more, we've been a playoff team. Years that we've had 11 or under 11, we haven't made the playoffs. So like that shows like the buy-in because you can show like actual data points. So using some of those like data-driven decisions helps with that buy-in because it's literally cause and effect. I think that's probably one of the best examples we could use right there. And just if you're consistent with that message and in also empowering like your assistant coaches to develop those relationships and, have a chance to lead the team in different things, that helps too, because now every kid feels like they have somebody on staff that's a trusted adult. And that's really good for like social emotional learning.
One of the things we hear commonly nowadays is that kids have changed, and every coach has a different opinion when it comes to this, whether or not kids have changed. I'm of the belief they have. I think a big part of the reason why kids have changed is because times have changed.
Sure.
Social media obviously plays a part in that. Expectations plays a part in that. The world we live in and society plays a part in that. Do you think kids have changed? And if so, why or why not?
I think maybe the patterns of behavior that kids have changed, right? So for example, right, the big one, right? None of us were dealing with cell phones when we were in high school, right? But I wonder what like smoking in the bathroom looked like at your school and my school when we were growing up. And I always, when I think of that quote, like,
I'm glad you brought that up, because I've actually never had a coach bring that up. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because I do think with vaping now and dab pens and all this other stuff, and I deal with it in my day job, we're living in a different time. I think that smoking in our day was much more of a segment of the population did it. It wasn't something that was, particularly cigarette smoking, it wasn't something that was necessarily common or popular amongst a larger majority of the student body. Whereas I think now it's more common with a larger group of the student body.
Yeah. There's a quote that always jumps out to me when people ask about like, oh, how's it kids? Because, people know I work with kids, and, I've been a teacher now for, a long time, like 16 years, and a coach. And this quote jumps out to me, and it's, the youth now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for elders, and they love to chatter instead of exercise. And Socrates said that 3,000 years ago. So it's like 3,000 years ago, the people were still saying the same thing about the kids these days. I just think it's like the way it comes out might change, for example, the cell phone, the vapor, and things like that. But, like kids are, will go off track. And what's really important to me is how are you helping that kid after they make a bad decision, and I've had to make some tough calls as a head coach. I think one that jumps out to me, and I don't mind sharing it, is after I was appointed as a head coach, the night before our first game, my first game ever as a head coach, we had some kids do some not some exemplary behavior in the locker room. And as soon as I was made aware of it, I suspended all the kids for that game. And it was 4 starters. So just imagine you're a young head coach out there. It's your first crack ever, first job. We ended up losing that game by 1 score. And nobody can ever convince me that you take 4 starters off a team, like in a 1-score game. We're winning that game. And I honestly wonder, and I look back, and I know if I hadn't made that call, that I don't think we have the success we do, because kids would have known, like, well, Marshall.
I had to do a similar thing when I was a head coach. Much different situation. I was in my 3rd year. Bottom line is, a bunch of my players ding dong ditched my house, and I had to suspend. This was on a Friday night. I had to suspend 6 of them. The next day, we're playing Wellesley at home. I had to suspend 6 of them, and we lost by 1 score. But the point that I'm trying to make by bringing it up is, though, I do think you send a message. The message resonates, and I think the kids see, okay, you either buy in and you're a part of what we want to do, or if you don't, we're going to go out there, compete without you. And if we play our hearts out, we're going to put ourselves in a position to succeed because we're the ones that care. That's why we're still here playing.
Exactly. And I think that also helps with the buy-in of like, those, I know when we talk about the values and everything like that, it means something to us. And as long as we're practicing those, and kids will see times we do and times we don't, and success that's correlated to that. And so, like, have kids changed? Of course, everybody looks a little bit different, but times have changed, like you said. But there's, no matter what, a young man, because we're predominantly dealing with young men playing football, they're still coming to learn what it means to be an adult and be a man in the society. And that's our jobs. And that's actually the first thing I look for in assistant coaches is this guy a great role model to put around these very impressionable 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds. And I think that's where we also get some buy-in, because every kid on my team can look at one of my coaches and see a role model. It's not going to be every coach for every kid, but somebody can see them. And so, we have a balance of alumni on our staff. We have a balance of like some guys who've been coaching for 43 years. We've got some guys who are teachers in the building, some guys who are active in the community. So that like kind of good mix, I think, helps with the buy-in as well, because every kid can look and find somebody who looks like them on our staff.
You are watching the Coaches Chat presented by Complete Quarterback. I'm your host, John Serenitas. This week, we are joined by Jonathan Marshall, head football coach at Randolph High School. Just want to remind you that if you are a quarterback's coach, a head coach, an offensive coordinator, or quarterback yourself, visit CompleteQB.com today for all your quarterback needs. You have techniques, drills, videos, you name it, it's all there. Visit CompleteQB.com today for all your quarterback needs. When we do dabble a little bit in some X's and O's here, we're not going to get into some details, but just some thoughts on your offensive and defensive philosophy, Coach. Why do you run what you run, and how do you think it fits your kids?
Absolutely. Yeah. Happy to share that. So, one reason that we're old school double wing, right? And it's funny because the previous programs that I coached for and, could RPO to death were spread programs, right? But, I learned some of the double wing stuff from Coach Kiley when we were in Holliston. Also played in a similar system when I was in high school. And one reason we do that is because of the trend right now is the spread it out RPO. Mm-hmm. So we're the change up. Ironically, in the playoffs, we played 3 double wing teams in a row, but the majority of teams we're out seeing there are now, spread RPO teams. So we're the change up. So every week, a defensive coordinator has to come up with a whole new defense for us and teach that and implement it in 3 days, 4 days, depending on the schedule. And so that's one major reason. The other thing is, to be honest, it's players, not plays. So we have, when I first took over the program, there was no youth football in town. There was no youth football at all. My first year as the head coach, there were only 17 kids in the entire town of Randolph playing football. That was it. That's K through 12. That was it. So, I wanted to bring in a system that was simple, but also effective and put my kids into a position to succeed. We've got, like I said, we're big on the multi-sport thing. So I've got basketball players, I've got track kids. So they're really athletic, but my assistant coach, Lou Adiviani, says it best. If you're thinking, you're not moving. So what can I do to keep this simple to kids who don't have an extensive playing background in the sport to just keep it? And I was like, this is the double wing. That's the answer to it. We can grind this out. We can get 3 yards. And when you have really good kids like we did this year, you average 41 points a game. That's so anybody who says, oh, you can't score a double wing, we average 41 points a game in the double wing. But again, we have amazing players that give us that, especially the big boys up front. And we have always some good linemen on this program. So that puts them in a position to succeed as well. So that's kind of our offensive philosophy. Defensive philosophy, it's more who's our opponent, what's our best fit. We have a couple different fronts we run, depending on who the opponent is, what's their system. Are they spread? Are they wing T? Are they I? Are they double wing like us? So really it goes back again to like players, not plays. And that goes into like the teaching that we do and how can we keep that simple system as well. So we're not blowing a kid's mind when we're going from 1 week, the 3-3 stack, to the next week, we're running the 4-3. But we use the same terminology to morph to whatever that opponent is. And when you have the buy-in from the kids, like we do, investing their time, like watching film on their own, we can do that. And that's where we've kind of closed the gap from playing towns that have established youth football programs. We're now wrapping up our 3rd year of having a middle school football program, which was something I started in 2021. And we're now like the kids who are seniors going in next year. So Abe was the starting quarterback when he was an 8th grader. He's now played 5 years in the same system. That is just absolute gold as a coach that we have this kid. And he started as a sophomore. And I think because we had that 8th grade program for him, that's why he was able to do that.
Obviously we talked about your recent success and you're in a pretty good position to keep it going because you've talked about some of the kids. Of course, Alan and Abe are going to be joining us here momentarily, but you have a pretty good group coming back. With that in mind, obviously, when you have a good group coming back, you have to manage expectations. So with that said, what are your expectations for next season? And I don't want you to predict what you think. No, we don't do that as coaches. We don't predict what we think we're going to do. But
oh gosh, no.
What are your expectations for what's going to end up being a senior-laden team?
Yeah. Our philosophy, like I said, it's the winners do more thing through and through. Our expectation is to work right now. We are, I think when I looked at our countdown clock, we keep up in the weight room 140 days away from football or something around there. Right now our expectation is that all of our kids are doing track or in the weight room or
And you
another
being
sport,
the athletic
in the
director,
spring.
I mean, which is huge. I mean, that used to be a lot
It's
more
huge.
prominent
Yeah.
back in the day when you had ADs and football coaches. You might have the
Yeah.
occasional AD basketball coach. It was a lot more prominent. You don't see it nearly as much anymore, but there is some advantages to that, no?
There is, yeah. It's myself and Matt Treveri down in Mashpee are the only AD football coaches in the league. I'm able to do that for a couple reasons. One is I have phenomenal fall coaches. I think of like Coach Buffard, my soccer coach. He's like some of these guys in the fall are just phenomenal coaches. And then I also am blessed to have a really great assistant athletic director, Jeff Tagger, who's like ready to become a full-time AD. That's the reason I'm able to do this and still coach and become an athletic director. But it's great to see the wide range. Like I love watching my football guys play other sports. Like I love going to the basketball games, love going out to the track. We were at, outside for a track meet yesterday for 3 hours. Like I love watching because it's like, oh, that you start looking at kids when they're performing something differently and you're like, oh, that's a skill that kid has, and then you start putting it in the football world. So it's great when you can see those kids performing that. So it's a unique perspective being the AD and head football coach. And I'm very appreciative of Randolph for giving me that. Because last year when I interviewed to be that athletic director, that was kind of the elephant in the room. And I love coaching. I don't see myself not coaching. We were able to work, and I appreciate the district kind of putting some supports in place.
And finally here, final question here. And again, I want to say thank you for taking the time, Coach. I really appreciate it. It is a Randolph Blue Devil night here at New England Football Journal. As we mentioned, Alan and Abe are going to be joining us here in a few minutes. Just some thoughts on the upcoming season. It's hard to believe today's May 1st. You blink and the offseason flies by. We think it's so far away after Thanksgiving or after the playoffs or after the Super Bowl, but it's already May 1st. So with that being said, just some looking ahead to the rest of the offseason and the upcoming season, expectations for the offseason, expectations for the upcoming season.
Yep. Yeah, our expectation is that we're going to bring back some talent. Obviously, like we mentioned, we're going to have Mekhi White, the New England Football Journal Player of the Year, Abe and Allen. We've got the young up-and-coming lineman, Aiden Davis, who is a great contributor for us. Really, the question for us is going to be, how do the younger guys who've now been playing like JV for us for the last 2 years step up? We've got some young linemen that look promising and are ready to go. And the expectation for them is that they got to be a part of our summer conditioning program. Also, we are very clear. We also want them to take a break during the summer, like take a week off, go do it. I model that. I take my vacation. So our expectation is if we do what we're supposed to, then we'll win. And that's kind of going to be our mantra for next year is work to win. So, any of my young guys that are watching right now, I hope they're going to put in the work. And reason I bring that up, John, is, when we won the Super Bowl in 2021, we brought back 7 starters from that Super Bowl team. And the next year we didn't make the playoffs. And, I'm blessed to have some success, but we've also had some challenges too. And really what that came down to was, I think we had a little lapse in the commitment of that summer program and the things that we do in the weight room and doing track and everything like that. So when you have 7 starters coming back from a Super Bowl team, you have all the expectations of the world. And me as the head coach, I'm responsible for that kind of mantra. So I've been driving the point all year. And I just think of the quote. It's like, losers do a little bit and think they've done enough. Winners do everything they can and still wonder if there's more to do. And that's kind of my expectation going into this is, I want my guys worried that they haven't done enough because we get right out of the gates week 1 against Blue Hills, an awesome football program that's had successes, are always in the Vote Tech Bowl. That's our week 1 opponent. That's a rivalry game for us. And Ed Madden does a phenomenal job there. So we got our hands full right out of the gate in week 1. So we better be.
Well, Coach, I want to say thank you for taking the time, my friend. I greatly appreciate it. It's great to catch up with you. And as always, if there's anything we could ever do in New England Football Journal to help out, feel free to let us know.
John, I appreciate it a ton. I know, we're kind of a smaller school and, we're running an offense that you have to watch black and white film for. So, I appreciate you having us on and talking to our guys in a little bit.
Of course, anytime, man. That's what we're here for. We're here to cover New England football, whether it be the Patriots, college, high school, we're here for it. So anything, like I said, we can ever do to help, feel free to let us know. That is Jonathan Marshall, head football coach at Randolph High School. That'll do it for this week's episode of the Coaches Chat. For Coach Marshall, I'm I'm John Sarianides. We'll be back at you here. I am still a coach.
You got an open job. We'll take it. I'm looking for one.
But we're going to continue with our Randolph theme. We've got Alan Nariska and Abe Cornett joining us here momentarily. Coach Marshall, John Sarianides, talk to you in a couple minutes. Peace.